I'm Blake Farmer, and this is Nashville. Growing up in Detroit, little Alice Randall found herself sitting in a car, waiting outside on her father. The sign said B-A-R, bar. Her dad, who she loved dearly, said he wouldn't be long, but her rider wheels were already spinning. Daddy won't go in that, don't go in that B-A-R. Please don't leave me alone in the car. Daddy, don't go in that B-A-R. When she got to Nashville in 1983, what was the basis for one of the songs that was in her folder of lyrics? Songwriter, publisher, screenwriter, professor, country music historian, Alice Randall. Thank you for joining us.
Blake, I am thrilled to be here.
All right, so how did the girl from Motown decide she wanted to make it in Music City?
Well, I think being born in Motown in 1959, I was surrounded by songwriters. And in fact, and female publishers, Anna Gordy, and these were friends of my family, although they were not in the music business. So I think, Motown and I were born the same year in the same place, 1959. So it was, I think, my destiny.
Oh, I see. So you really, your life aligned with Motown itself.
Actually, yes. And I knew from the beginning that the publishers and writers made more money than the artist. And I was being encouraged, my father was a small businessman, to think about things like that.
Wow.
But deeper, my mother, my aunt, and my grandmother, they only love one thing in common. And it was not me. As I sadly say, my mother did not love me. It was country music. And so country music was my love language since literally the week I was born.
Yeah, and you write a lot about your mother in the book, and yes, I know it sounds harsh, but it does. In several episodes, it's very clear what you say about her and loving you. But from your book, your memoir, My Black Country, you write, "What black women taught me to love, I taught myself to write." So when did you decide, okay, I love this music, how do I make it?
Well, literally, I did write. That event happened. My father left me outside the BAR, and I said to him, please don't leave me in the car. Please don't go in that BAR. And I spent time in my aunt's house in a cherry tree. And I would get bored, and I would sing to the birds in the cherry tree, an only child. And usually I was singing songs I'd already heard, a lot of Ray Charles songs from the modern sounds in country and Western, other songs. And I started singing original songs to the birds. So I literally started writing country songs when I was 3, 4, or 5 years old in a Motown cherry tree. That is actually the truth. And I just continued. I never really stopped.
Well, you weren't just in Detroit growing up. You also spent some time in D.C. and even a few years on a farm in Virginia, right?
Yeah. In D.C., I was kidnapped by my mother, literally, from my father, and moved to Washington, D.C. And one of the things is I got to hear Little Feat. I got to hear a much larger range of music in D.C., and that was an advantage, including some classical. Roberta Flack was singing in the bars in D.C. when I was growing up. That was a wonderful experience. I had a sort of evil stepfather, and he had a country house in Virginia. And there I was immersed again in a different kind of country, the country radio. And the house that we stayed in the weekends, it had a John Prine cassette. And that sort of changed my life in another way.
Well, and you even, and John Prine, it strikes me that didn't your latest record come out with Oh Boy Records, which is John Prine's label?
Absolutely.
Well, we'll get to that full circle moment here in a minute. But, you wrote one of your first songs there in Virginia. It starts out, "It's a running out of luck town in old Virginia. Honeysuckle scents the new night air. In a churchyard stands a child comforting her child, seeking refuge from the shame she bears." But this was the beginnings of Reckless Night, one of your first cuts recorded by the Forester Sisters. So Reckless Night, I guess, is about a reckless night. But yeah, how did that become your first song to make it on a record?
Well, I brought that song in my little portfolio, the bones of the lyric with me. And I met Mark Sanders at what was called the Weenie Roast. And the funny thing is, when I started talking to him on Music Row, he said he'd like to write a song with me. We were talking about all these things. And I said, no, you don't want to write a song with me. And he said, yeah, I do. I said, no, I have no talent whatsoever. And he said, don't talk about yourself that way. And I said, no, I have no talent whatsoever. You said that. And I had gone and pitched songs at Acuff Rose before I got here. And Ronnie Gant, that was Hank Williams Sr.'s company, and Ronnie Gant, who was the head of Acuff Rose at the time, literally put his feet up on the desk, shook his head and said, you need to go back to wherever it is where you came from. And then he said, well, maybe you're at such a low level of development, I won't appreciate it. I'm going to send it to a couple of my young writers. And then he wrote me a letter after I got back to Washington, D.C., and he said, my writers say you have no talent whatsoever. And that's exactly when I decided I was moving to Nashville to be a country songwriter.
Yeah,
and
why
publisher.
wouldn't you? Why wouldn't you come? Such encouragement. So you bring this song along with you. What is it? You know, it's so interesting to listen back to songs. I guess this was recorded in the mid '80s, right? Mm-hmm. It's subtle what you're trying to do, but what is the story behind that song?
Well, the deep part of that song there works on many levels. One, so it's a translation into country song of the Scarlet Letter, of the religious hypocrisy that the man and the woman have sex and the girl gets shunned.
Because she can't hide it.
Yeah, she can't hide it. On a Jungian sense, it captured me in the isolation I felt on that farm. I am the girl in the churchyard rocking the baby of self. You know, that there it works on that level. But it's a Scarlet Letter, and it's also... It was an homage to my love of metaphysical poetry, that whole part, the image of God's tears and the idea, her lover stands within, thinking God's forgiven him and cleansed him of a sin he'll never hide. Well, if you, like me, had studied 17th century Puritan sermons at Harvard, which I did, that was what my focus was. You know, God does not forgive you for sins you do not hide. So it was a sly confrontation with the hypocrisy, religious hypocrisy that would shun the girl and protect the boy. And I was so thrilled that the Forrester sisters recorded it, and they put it on it was a B-side of a #1 single, but it wouldn't have got there without a person I want to shout out to, one of my heroes, Bobby Braddock.
Bobby Braddock, big songwriter.
He wrote Divorce. He wrote He Stopped Loving Her Today. And Bobby and I have now been friends for 40-some years. And when he got inducted into the Chris Christopherson Award, I spoke. My video praising him was on the Ryman, which was a great honor to me because he is just one of the two great American poets working today, still in country. But Bobby saw the lyric Mark and I had come up with, and he said about the chorus, the first two lines are great. You'll never get lines as good as those. Use those twice. And that generosity of the edit, that's some of what Nashville was like as a songwriting town in 1985, that people cared about, or 83, 84, 85, they cared about the poetry, and we helped each other.
What were those two lines, just so we have them on the tip of our tongue?
She rocks her baby in the cool moonlight, the legacy of a reckless night. She rocks.
Just do it
her
again.
Baby in the cool moonlight, the legacy of a reckless night.
Well, that's the genius of Nashville, that less is more a lot of times.
Wait. And my first dog, when married, we named him Reckless after that.
Reckless.
He was a little Shih Tzu I got in Manila.
Love that. You write in your memoir that, you kind of had to slip your best ideas in sideways. You said you were going to find a way to put some progressive ideas into the heads of people who didn't typically listen to them. Were the other writers you were working with in on that, or are you even sort of slipping it past your collaborators?
There was a range, and I, wrote with some absolutely wonderful people, and people who, Mark Sanders was a great writer, interested in doing the same thing with me. Bob McDill, who wrote Good Old Boys Like Me, I learned a thing or two from that song. those Williams boys still mean a lot to me. Hank and Tennessee. That's Tennessee Williams and
see.
Hank Williams. So I learned, and there were the Whites, and Ricky Skaggs was huge at the time when we were writing, and his song "Heartbroke," has slides in a lot of things. So I think that I actually on this album there's one of my favorite cuts on the album is also the most tragic cut on the album.
When you say this album, you're talking about My Black Country, the album, because
Yes.
there's a corresponding album. How do you call it? It goes with the book, I guess. Is it a companion album? What would you call it?
A companion album,
Okay.
I think. And it's there's a song on it called The Ballad of Sally Ann. And in this case, Rhiannon Giddens is singing it and also playing on it. And
So this is a song you wrote long ago, performed, though, not by a black woman.
it was performed by John Cowan from Newgrass Revival, one of the great modern voices in contemporary bluegrass. But this is an exciting one that Mark O'Connor, the great fiddle player, Isaac Stern said he was the greatest living fiddle player, and Mark Sanders and I wrote this together. Now, what's wild is we wrote one song and it got rejected. They said, "We thought you'd write, particularly with Alice, something edgier and weirder and more interesting." And I thought, okay, if you're ready for edgy, weird, and interesting, we're going to write a song about a man who gets lynched between his wedding and his reception. And his wife, his woman, confronts the town and says, "Who's going to dance with Sally Ann?" And this is both an homage to songs like Long Black Veil, but it's also an homage to Supper Time and one of the extraordinary country blues recordings of all time, Billie Holiday singing Strange Fruit, which I also think is a country song.
Wow. If you're just tuning in, I'm Blake Farmer. This is Nashville. We're with songwriter, author, publisher Alice Randall. I want to hear what Nashville was like back then, but at first I'm going to read your words because you said you kind of experienced Nashville when this episode happened. You walked into the Wellington Arms Laundry Room, which is a fancy apartment building in Belmead, right?
Right.
The crimson Calvin Klein sweats that you'd purchased to lounge in Oak Bluffs, Martha's Vineyard. A middle-aged white woman wearing khaki pants and a crisp white shirt walked in with a basket of laundry, smiled, and asked me, "Whose are you?" When I didn't answer, the woman repeated her question, adding, "Do you belong to this, that person?" Yeah, how were you received?
Well, the punchline of that was then I screamed. I was so shocked because at first she said, "Whose are you?" I didn't even know what she meant.
I kind of
And
thought
then-
figurative. You meant you actually screamed in her face.
Yes, I literally, because at that moment she looked like a monster to me. I was so shocked. I just went, "Ah!" I mean, I screamed at the top of my lungs. I didn't even say any words.
Wow.
I just screamed because I was so shocked by what she was saying. That she believed that it wasn't that I minded being mistaken for maid. I respect maids. I minded that she thought a maid was the possession
Right.
of someone.
Whose are you?
And the other side of that is that two of women who are working essentially as commercial domestic servants on Music Row, particularly in the ASCAP building, were great allies of mine when I first came here. But it was hard. I literally, actually, the bank rented me my first apartment because people didn't like to rent to Black people back then in Nashville when I got here, unless you were living.
The bank meaning what?
I opened up a bank account and I was they said, they literally looked at some apartments and rented it for me. I'd never seen my apartment until it was rented and I moved in.
In the 80s,
83.
a black woman had trouble renting, and you could afford a nice apartment. Is that part of it? It was like, wrong part of town.
I don't know. All I know is it was hard
Wow.
and people knew it was hard. So, there are great things about Nashville. I love Nashville. And there are great things about being a Black person in Nashville. There's Meharry Medical College and Fisk and Tennessee State University. There's a rich Black intellectual community in Nashville. And there's a lot of respect for Black creatives on Music Row. People knew that Ray Charles was a genius. People knew that DeFord Bailey actually played on the Opry all those years. So it wasn't one thing or another, but I literally talk about one of the traumas of my life. I'm not going to name the artist right here, that is so often spoken with reverence. And I love their writing. And when I came here, I wanted to meet them. And I got close and met them. And they stepped just a few feet back, not as far as you are from me right now. And they said, I've been at this too long if I have to compete with, and he said the N-word.
Oh, my.
We'll say he said colored girls from Harvard, but he didn't say colored. And literally right in front of me, he said, I've been at this too long if I have to compete with colored girls from Harvard. But he didn't say colored. So it was not, everyone did not welcome me with open arms.
Wow.
But as I said, the two Bobbies, Bob McDill and Bobby Braddock, both gave me a lot of support. Ronnie Gant didn't initially, but you know who did was Buddy Killen. He was the head of Tree at that time. He was
Tree Publishing, which was a very prominent publishing company.
It was arguably the top one. And he had Harlan Howard, the dean. He had Bobby Braddock. He had amazing people. But I love that he had discovered the Allman Brothers originally. And he also worked with Outkast, with Andre.
Wow.
That at the end of his career. So I love that I was a Buddy Killen discovery.
Love that. Well, you were in the publishing business from the beginning. If I understood correctly, basically got an investor to kind of back you for a few years. And but I think to a lot of folks, it's complicated to understand. Well, what, publishing, the songwriting, what's the? But why was it important to you to get into publishing from the beginning?
Because as Quincy Jones said to me, publishing is the real estate of the music business. But what it was to me, it was the freedom. That I knew I wanted to do unusual things. And if you look at the songs of mine that I had recorded, Small Towns Are Smaller for Girls. That's a statement. Reckless Night, about religious hypocrisy. Girls Ride Horses Too. Many Mansions, about homeless people. Who's Minding the Garden? Why is it the church more concerned with ecology? I didn't want to write love songs. I never did. I wanted to write songs. One of the things I love about country is Merle Haggard, Hungry Eyes, that these songs are talking about significant social issues. That's what I love about country, significant psychological issues. So I knew to have the freedom to do that, I had to protect myself as a songwriter, and I wanted to protect other songwriters.
Wow. Well, we're going to get into exactly what it takes to make a country song, because I'll tell you what, Alice Randall has a very unique list that we'll get into. We're with country music straight talking historian, songwriter Alice Randall. We'll get into X's and O's, her first number one, and getting burned by the great blonde shark. Stay with us. This is Nashville. I'm Blake Farmer, and this is Nashville. Well, we're with Alice Randall today, and we are trying to decide what makes a song a country song. And Alice Randall has a lengthy and pithy checklist. Love of whiskey and guns? Check. Offering advice? Check. Feeling sentimental about Bible thumping and open roads? Check. Putting child rearing and sibling relations over sexual adventures with lovers or bonds with friends? Check. Honoring the patriarch? Check. Concerns with good and evil and a determination to be good? Check. Shouting out Texas? Check. And the list goes on. But yeah, what does make a song country? Because, I mean, already in this conversation, you've talked about a couple of songs that people don't consider country. It's like, I would call that a country song. Well, what is it?
Well, I have two formulas. The easiest one is Celtic, English, Irish, and Scottish ballad form storytelling orientation plus Black influences plus evangelical Christianity. You need all three of those things to have a country song be country. But to go with my friend Harlan Howard, it's 3 chords and 4 very particular truths. Life is hard. God is real. The road, women, and whiskey are compensations, and the past is better than the present. Those are the great themes of country.
The past is better than the present. That's so profound. I mean, yeah, that is kind of what is going to be in a country song.
Absolutely. And that has roots in Africa, too, because who knew better the past was better than the present than a newly enslaved African in these Americas looking back to Africa, or white and Black and Asian people who are remembering their childhood as their best hour, where some adult protected them. So we see nostalgia for a lost time past and a lost past in your time.
Did you your checklist, did you really, as you were writing, say, like, does this have all three parts of your equation there? Like, if there's no evangelical Christianity, I don't know that's going to work. Like, did you use it to say, this may not be ready for prime time yet?
Ultimately, and you can see that in all many mansions is speaking, I mean, literally has the Bible in it.
Yeah.
And for what shall come to pass when the first shall be the last. Who's minding the garden?
I see. You're using biblical language.
Yes, but I had learned one of the funny things is when I came down here to Nashville, one of the things I understood about country from the very beginning is that it was metaphysical poetry. One of my favorite country songs is Drop Kick Me Jesus to the Goalpost of Life. It is a metaphysical conceit. It is a 17th century British metaphysical poets. That is an elaborate metaphor. Country is all full of them, and they are related. The metaphysical poets were living at the same time that the King James Bible was being written, translated, and so all of that gets swept up together. So I always knew there was a lot of Bible language, because without the Christianity, a roots folk song could be a blues song.
Yeah.
And without the Blackness, it can just be a folk song. It takes all three of these things.
Yeah. And if she sounds like she's teaching this like it's a class at an elite university, well, that's because she does teach this class at Vanderbilt as a professor, just one of her many jobs. All right, let's get to your first number one song on the country charts. Became this very pivotal moment for your, in my reading, like your entire life and career. It's X's and O's by Trisha Yearwood, which was a big hit in 1994.
She a picture, she a mama in all black pearls. Took her daddy's world and made it wild for Black American girls.
Sorry about that. Can you play the Trisha Yearwood one? It's all right. I should have named them much differently.
Well, she's got her God and she's got good wine. Aretha Franklin and Patsy Cline. She used to tie her hair up in ribbons and bows, sign her letters with X's and O's. Got a picture of her mama in heels and pearls. She's gonna make it in her daddy's world, an American girl.
All right, so sneaking things in sideways, putting Aretha Franklin before Patsy Cline, intentional?
Absolutely. Matrace and I worked on that together.
Well, so expand on this line. You got a picture of your mama in heels and pearls, and you're trying to make it in your daddy's world. Where'd it come from?
Literally the shower. That was a wild occasion. I was working on a television series about ex-wives of country stars for CBS with Brandon Tartikoff.
Like a reality show?
No, it was a fiction show.
Okay.
It was Nashville way before the show Nashville.
see.
And I love Callie Corey in Nashville. But we were doing it way back in 1994 with Brandon Tartikoff, the man who gave us Seinfeld and a whole bunch of other great TV shows. So, and I got it into my contract, aside from writing the script for that and being a producer, that I got to write the theme song. And I wrote, Matrace and I, we wrote and wrote.
Matrace, who a frequent collaborator.
Yes, and I love Matrace Berg, an inspiration. When I was driving down to Nashville in 1983, I was listening to her song, Faking Love, Only Temporary Lovers as we lay here neath the covers, faking love. She was a teenager when she had her first number one.
Wow.
So we wrote, and I knew the songs we had come up were not good. So I thought we're either going to have to use Ring of Fire or some classic. And I was in the shower on a Monday morning. I had called my publisher saying, we didn't do it. I'm not going to pretend that we did. And I literally said to myself in the shower, I was talking to myself, you got a picture of your mama in heels and pearls and you're trying to make it in your daddy's world and this ain't working, kid. That's what I said first. And then I said, that is my song.
Wait, this was self-talk. You're talking to
I'm
yourself.
talking to myself in the shower. I'm so upset. And in halfway through the shower, the phone rings, and it is literally my little girl's school telling me I forgot to put some thing that she had to be signed, some paperwork that had to be signed in her backpack. And so I'm thinking, you are a total failure. This is not working. And then again, phone rings, baby cries. Now, it wasn't a baby, it was a first grader. But TV, and I was getting fat for the first time. TV diet guru lies. Good morning, honey.
Yeah.
So literally, I ran to her school. I did go give my child's thing first at the school. Then I literally ran to Matrice's house. It was before a lot of and I banged on the door, and I literally told her the first lines on her porch. She opened the door in, and the second verse came to her almost as quickly as the first verse came to me. We put it all together. We gave it 2 hooks just to be safe because it had to be X's and O's was the name of the TV show. And then we added, she's an American Girl. It's a song with a double hook. But the original American Girl was my little girl, Matrice's play goddaughter, Caroline Randall Williams.
Well, I love that. And so, your memoir, My Black Country, has this companion album, and we'll talk more coming up about this, but your daughter Caroline had this reimagining of X's and O's. Let's listen.
She a picture, she a mama in all black pearls. Took her daddy's world and made it wild for black American girls. I said she's a daddy's girl in a daddy's world. That's how she got strong. Raised me in a house she paid for. Put our life in a song, and it's X's and O's. Forever and ever now. Ribbons and bows and stay.
Yeah, like X's and O's forever. What does that mean to you?
One, that the writing goes on and on. And another, one of the things, Patsy Cline also wrote letters. And Matrice and I both like to celebrate women's traditional art forms, like the letters that people write in their own family. And Aretha Franklin also wrote songs. Her sister was a bigger songwriter, but Aretha Franklin was a songwriter. So we were also honoring the multiple kinds of ways that women write, including songwrite, and the very different way that women keep score, that it's by balancing, keep the balance up between love and money. And we put the love first.
Well, that's beautiful. If you're just tuning in, I'm Blake Farmer. This is Nashville. We're with songwriter and many other things, Alice Randall. All right, so X's and O's. You'd had a lot of songs that had been recorded, had been cut, as they say, but not a number one. Why is a number one such a big deal?
It is simply a pinnacle, and it's rare. I'd had a top 10, my song, which I love, Girls Ride Horses too. I'd had another top 40 with Mo Bandy and an album title. But number one means, but you know what's more exciting than a number one and what's bigger than X's and O's being a number one? It was 2 weeks at number one.
Oh, okay.
And the second week, I don't even think the label wanted it. They had something else. That is America. When you have a number one song, that means people all around America are engaging with this. And it also means that people who wouldn't normally hear the song get a chance to hear it.
You're saying that the label can actually kind of put their thumb on the scale and try to help make a song number one on radio. But if the second week, it's like they might have wanted to have another song up there, and people just liked your song too much.
Exactly.
Wow.
And all the labels are trying to make everything a number one, so they can't determine things.
Yeah.
But when you take your foot off the gas, that second week at number one,
I see.
that was literally American Women. And one of the most exciting things I'm 66 years old now. That song has been out since 1994. So it's a long time. It's almost 30 years old, that song, or 30 years old, this song. It's still a hot, recurrent country. It's a contemporary country classic. It is played a week or month don't go by that I don't hear it. But when I'm out, I went to 25 or 26 cities with My Black Country, the book. And I have heard every kind of person tell me that particularly young person, that song has been in their life, that their mother drove the carpool singing
Totally.
it, that they grew up on that song.
It's in our we go to the lake every year with my wife's parents. It's on the lake playlist, okay? So yeah, it's still making the rounds. But tell me about the Big Mistake and the Great Blonde Shark that kind of came after this period of your first number one.
Well, like many people in the music business, but not like many people who went to Harvard in the music business, that's why no one had any mercy on me.
I see.
I made a big mistake. I was going out to lunch. We had a huge hit, 2 weeks at number one. I knew what that meant. I knew how much every publishing company wanted me. It wasn't my first cut. And I was going out to lunch with the big blonde shark and they said, well, just sign this extension because I'm up for some things. Women, we've got to work together. And if people think you're not going to stay, I need you to sign. And I said, I need to have my lawyer look at it. She said, it's just the same thing. It just extends the time period. And I signed it, but it wasn't the same thing. It let them recoup from my writer's share, which meant basically hundreds of thousands of dollars were stolen from me. But that song was so successful, it eventually got out of, I call that songwriting jail. But that was a hard thing. And it was particularly hard for me because I realized that why I didn't fight back in real time. My mother had been a very abusive mother. And that, my fear of powerful women, my fear of the betrayal, was too strong. My panic of being destroyed I hadn't had enough therapy yet. So, and the other thing is I never really did care that much about money.
Well, that helps.
And so what happened was I moved on. And from that, I started to write novels and
there you
books.
go.
And I'll be up to the one I'm working on right now is number 10. And my first novel that I wrote became a New York Times bestseller.
And just to explain, the recoup, what does that technically mean, recoup from your writer's share?
Well, there's a quick introduction to publishing that in Nashville, one of the great things about Nashville is that publishing companies will give you an advance against future earnings so that you can be a professional writer and write all the time. Let's just say they give you $100 and there's there's the publisher's share and the writer's share. And typically writers get their share, the publisher gets their share. Sometimes in unusual circumstances, the publisher can only recoup against the publisher's share. Sometimes if somebody wants an awful lot of money or different things and things have changed, they can also recoup against your writer's share. But the writer's share is your share. And I would never, ever have signed mine away.
I see.
Ever. Intentionally. But when you sign a contract you haven't read, you don't know what you're signing.
After that, I mean, and you've had many songs recorded since then, many.
Mm-hmm.
I think maybe even in every decade since you've had songs recorded. But it did seem like you kind of took your foot off the gas in Music Row and kind of moved over to books. Was it because of like this business is not treating me well, or just I've done what I need to do here and I'm going to try something else?
It was actually three things. One, getting to number one had been the goal. So once I had been to number one and had gotten songs recorded and done things that I mattered to me, and in my publishing life, I had published Mark Sanders and a small part of Garth Brooks.
Right, and even
So-
getting Trisha Yearwood, was it somehow related to Garth Brooks? I mean, they're
No, I
related
knew
now.
them independently.
I see.
So I knew Trisha. Trisha and Garth had both sang demos for me before they had their first album deals.
Wow.
So I actually knew them independently. In fact, when I went over to the studio, the X's and O's was originally supposed to be recorded by Winona Judd, and she recorded it but didn't come back to do the overdubs because she had a medical issue. But we didn't know that. We're in the studio waiting for her. And I literally ran into another studio where Trisha was singing on her own album. And I literally said, I know you back to our first husbands. We know each other. This is my last big chance. I need you to I need you to come to the studio and sing Winona's tracks in her key, which is not necessarily the same key, and come do this. And she hit it out of the ballpark. But so part of it was getting that I accomplished some of what I wanted to do. I had number ones. I had worked a lot with Mary Tyler Moore. I hadn't mentioned that to you. She owned a record label at that time, Mary Tyler Moore Records. So she had Holly Dunn and Judy Rodman, and they were doing sort of feminist country. And that's where I had my top 10 with Girls Ride Horses 2 with Judy Rodman, Holly Dunn, Girls right? Small towns are smaller for girls. Still a big statement. But another part was being stolen from. That it was a little bit shocking. But I also just in my 20s I wrote songs. In my 30s, I wrote screenplays, and in my 40s, I wrote novels. I was moving on to other things, and I was a little bit frustrated that one of my goals, which I've just seen this past year, I wanted to help build a major Black woman country artist. I knew there had not been one. There have been groups like the Pointer Sisters. There have been individuals, but there hadn't been a big star. There was not the equivalent of Ray Charles or Lionel Richie or Charlie Pride. And there was no equivalent of Charlie Pride, someone who had a major, Black woman with a major career. By about 94, when I'd done this for 10 or 11 years, written a video of the year for Reba, having all this success, I gave up on getting that done. I was not managing to get that done.
I see.
So I wanted to try another way. So I went with books. I wrote movies. I thought I could write a movie with that theme, and we could put all the songs in the movies. That's how I started working with Quincy Jones and Oprah.
Such an entrepreneur in all things. Well, we're going to get into the books when we come back, but we need to take one more break. We're with Alice Randall, elevating the very Black history of country music when we come back. It's kind of hiding all around us. Stay with us. This is Nashville. I'm Blake Farmer, and this is Nashville. We've heard a lot in recent years about the Black roots of country music on this program, on public radio, more broadly. Even the banjo being an African instrument has kind of had to be reclaimed. But not until reading Alice Randall's memoir did I consider this fact that she points out. Music Row developed on top of a historically Black neighborhood, Edge Hill. And the influences crept into studio recordings. You even had Black musicians playing a big role in the early days who hardly got credit. Alice Randall, what have we missed by sort of whitewashing the history of country music?
That it's one of those powerful, progressive stories in our American history that Black and white people and Asian people and indigenous people co-created country, literally.
But I think some people could hear, even some of the points that you make about the Carter family in Upper East Tennessee, and so that a lot of them they end with, I can't prove this, but so I don't know. Is there kind of
there's stuff we absolutely can prove.
What
I
are
talk
those
about
things?
a first family of Black country. One of the most important things is Jimmie Rodgers. The first million-selling country record was Blue Yodel #9.
You mind if we listen to it before you talk about
Blue
it?
Yodel,
All right,
please.
Lil Hardin plays a big part in this. Blue Yodel #9. This is Jimmie Rodgers, a white man.
Listen, all you rounders, you better leave my women alone. 'Cause I'll take my special and run all you rounders home.
Kind of want to keep that going, but we need to move on. So why is that song important?
Three geniuses. There's Jimmie Rodgers' voice. Three geniuses play on that. The horn is Louis Armstrong. The piano is Lil Hardin Armstrong.
Lil Hardin, which is his wife.
His wife, who also graduated from Fisk, for those people who are, this is Nashville. She was
Really?
3 years here living in Nashville. And so here we have the literally first million-selling country single, and two of the three people playing on it are Black.
I see.
So that's factual. We have pictures of the session. It happened out in Los
Right.
Angeles. And there's a wonderful, I encourage your listeners to go onto YouTube and find the Johnny Cash show episode with Louis Armstrong and Johnny Cash.
Oh, like the old Johnny Cash show.
He
I
had
see.
Louis on and they talked about this.
Really?
the
Because
recording.
he thought of this as the first big song in country music.
Well, yes, Jimmy Rogers is considered, Roy Acuff said he's the father of country music.
Yeah.
But this song is the text. So that's number one. Another one that we absolutely know and can document is the original cowboy songs. The first collection of those that happened with Thorpe at the beginning part of the 20th century, about 1907, in those early hundreds, aughts. The first cowboy camp that he came to, this is documented, was a black cowboy camp. It is documented that 20 to 30% of cowboys were black and brown, and the brown ones were indigenous and white and potentially black. So we just by documenting, which is well documented, the original cowboy songs, and Jimmy Rogers playing with Louis Armstrong and Lil. So I call Lil the mama of Black country. DeFord Bailey, the Opry's first superstar. We know that. We can document it. They're the mama and papa. I say their genius child was Ray Charles. Everyone knows modern sounds in country and Western music. And I say DeFord's side child is Charlie Pride. We know Entertainer of the Year, so many number ones. And then Herb Jeffries gets forgot. But Herb Jeffries, in the 21st century, Warner Brothers did an album on Herb Jeffries, The Bronze Buckaroo. He was so popular at one point, Herbie Hancock, the jazz musician, is named from Herb Jeffries, who in the 30s and 40s was a singing black cowboy. And we still have copies of some of those films. So we know that's real.
I see. So the other things where it's like, well, who taught the Carter family to play banjo? It's like, yeah, there's some things we can't know, but there's enough.
There's a lot we can know.
Let's listen to a little bit of DeFord Bailey and talk about his legacy. Known for playing the harmonica, he was on the Grand Ole Opry almost from the beginning, and here he is in later years.
Here with us on the Grand Ole Opry stage tonight, DeFord Bailey with his famous rendition of Pan American Blues.
You talk about DeFord Bailey quite a bit, and he has this interesting story, and I wonder how people were talking about DeFord Bailey when you first got to Nashville.
They were talking about him
he
as
just died, right?
As a year before I got here, as a tragedy, as a cautionary tale for me. When
Why?
they would tell me the story, they said he started off so strong and then he died in poverty, different versions. He died in a housing project, died some terrible way. But that is not the true end of DeFord Bailey's, and that he didn't play music. That is not true. In the 40s, DeFord was pushed out of the Opry. There's a lot of controversy as what the details of that. But what is not controversial, and what I have documented, is that DeFord Bailey actually played music to the week he died, that DeFord Bailey was the father and grandfather of musicians, and even more significantly than that, DeFord Bailey wrote and recorded and sang a jingle for Senator Avon N. Williams, the downtown.
Who you know pretty well.
He was my father-in-law. That he was the downtown campus of Tennessee State University is currently named for him, but he was the first state senator in Tennessee, black state senator elected in Tennessee, and so DeFord helped get, we called him Big Avon elected with one of his jingles and singing it. So he was not just making music, he was making powerful political music. And he was the first person to play after the word Grand Ole Opry was spoken on the radio for the first time. The next sound you heard was DeFord and his harmonica.
It's about as country as you get when you talk about an origin story. As you're kind of recasting some of this, bringing up some, almost feeling like you have to prove a point here. I mean, I'm questioning you, right? How do people receive that in the industry? Who this does not sound like the history they learned about country music.
Well, it's interesting to who knew and who didn't know. When I first started off, my father told me black people invented the banjo. My father used to say things, what do you bet that traditional is a color gal? I wasn't sure. Now, you have to remember, I was born in 59. You know what also happened in 59? Ray Charles had a big hit with Just for a Thrill, not on country, on R&B. But who wrote that was Lil Hardin. So he was back in Lil Spear, and she's pointing him towards country music, and he's going to do a few years later modern sounds and country and Western music. But do you think Lil Hardin didn't know she played on Blue Yodel No. 9? Of course she did. Do you think Louis Armstrong didn't know he played on? Of course he did. So these people talked in the black world when they are hearing it on the radio. They're saying, I wrote that. I sang on that. And it's just like, I've told people I wrote X's and O's and they didn't believe me. That I don't try to convince them. So, but when I first came here and started doing some of the historical research, it was to find out if the stories my father and black music, Detroit, Motown had told me were true. And I didn't find any lies. I found more people like Lamel Prince, who put out some really cool songs that people have forgotten her. At the same time, I love Linda Martell, but everyone's talking about Linda Martell. At that same time, Lamel Prince did some extraordinary music. She's working with the same person who's working with Loretta Lynn and Tammy Wynette. And she gets pushed out. But I had heard it in the black world. We remember Lamel Prince. We remembered Lil Hardin, and
I love that you actually knew these stories all along. You just weren't sure if they were true, and that's what this research and project has been. You wrote that to enter the world of country would be to invade its citadel. To have a success in country would be a way of exploding myths of black inferiority and absence in the place where the myth was having an ongoing killing effect on black people who had not been afforded the same privileges and advantages I had received. The invasion is so evocative. And I just wonder, is elevating black history of Nashville's most prominent export, country music, is this your life's work?
I certainly think it's a center part of my legacy. That I've been in country music for 40 years, and the first 20 years I spent mainly creating, hoping to do something transformative. And in the second 20 years, I completely committed, doubled down to getting the story out. I published the first national article on Linda Martell in the Oxford American. I started spotlighting the genius of others. I published on Lil Hardin in books. I was not wanting to create, I wanted to spotlight others. And now one of the things I love, I got Vanderbilt to buy Reese Palmer's papers. And so that's adding black women country artists to the archive.
Oh, my.
I pitched her a song. I think you've talked about it on this show. Will You Run? I'm working with a black woman artist out of Mississippi right now, Elsie, who I adore, her song Ghetto Cowboy.
Wait, are you saying that, let's say Reese Palmer, pitching her this song, which I don't think you wrote or anything, right?
No,
you didn't
have nothing
co-write
to do
this
with
song. You're saying you're trying to say, hey, I see a lane for you here. This song would be perfect. It's Can You Run? It's written from the vantage point of an enslaved
Enslavement.
person.
Yes.
Right
in the middle of the Civil War, and can you run to the freedom line?
Yeah.
That now I'm completely about being the godmother, the grandmother, the auntie, for free and for fun, giving young artists, songwriters particularly black, but all young artists. I've supported Justin Townes Earl. I was a very big supporter of his work. My legacy now is spotlighting black artists in country and hidden black genius, but it is also nurturing extraordinary and eccentric voices in country and Western music and giving them assistance where I can.
Wow. Well, you are one of those eccentric voices. And as Reese Palmer called you, country music's griot, which was a word that I don't use every day, but, this sort of African storyteller. And it's what I'm going to call you today. So Alice Randall, country music's griot, a songwriter first, also publisher, author, screenwriter, professor. Did we even get to all those things? I don't know, but it's all the time we have. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Blake. Thank you for doing what you're doing, helping Nashville understand itself.
Well, thank you for tuning in this hour. This is Nashville is a production of Nashville Public Radio. If you enjoyed today's episode, also go listen to songwriter, artist Reese Palmer, who was on recently. You can find that in your podcast app. You can also watch on YouTube or listen at thisisnashville.org. Today's episode was produced by yours truly. Songwriting Week is produced by Josh Deepen and Liv Lombardi, who's also making us sound and look good over there on the board. Tasha A.F. Limley is our managing editor. The masterminds behind our theme music are Larange and Namir Blade. Are you a songwriter? Want to be a songwriter? Just curious about how the Nashville industry works? We welcome your questions and comments for our shows this week. We'll be doing a co-write live on air. We'll get into the technicalities of split sheets and performing rights organizations. And we'll do a live call-in with some fairly big names, biggest songwriter names in town. What do you want to hear? Our voicemail is always listening, 615-751-2500. You can also find us on Instagram at thisisnashville_WPLN. I'm Blake Farmer. Go in peace.